legal authority of any sort to do that. And he says, I know I don't. The president has a moral duty to the American people that is higher than his constitutional duty. And by Godfrey, I'm going to do it if I have to.
A conservative congressman confronted the president. What about the Constitution of the United States, he asked. How could private property be put to public purposes without due process of law? Roosevelt grasped his visitor's lapels. The Constitution was made for the people, and not the people for the Constitution, he said. The mine owners retreated, but only slightly. They agreed to follow the suggestions of a presidential commission, provided no member of the United Mine Workers Union sat on it. But Roosevelt was determined that labor have a voice, and appointed the head of the Railroad Conductors Union instead. The owners objected until the president told them with a straight face that he was naming him as a sociologist, not a union man.
I shall never forget the mixture of relief and amusement I felt when I thoroughly grasped the fact that, while they would heroically submit to anarchy rather than have Tweedledum, yet if I would call it Tweedledee, they would accept it with rapture. It gave me an illuminating glimpse into one corner of the mighty brains of these captains of industry.
The mine owners continued to refuse to recognize the union, but they did agree to a 10% pay raise and a 9-hour day. The strike ended. American homes would be heated, and in the midterm elections, the Republicans would maintain majorities in both houses of Congress. Roosevelt was jubilant. He was the first president to mediate a labor dispute, the first to treat labor as a full partner, the first to threaten to employ federal troops to seize a strike-bound industry. And it had all worked.
Cambridge, Massachusetts, October 26, 1902. Dearest Mama, it has been very chilly here for the past week, and the Harvard buildings have been cold through lack of fuel. But now that the strike is settled, the coal has begun to come in small quantities. In spite of the president's success in settling the trouble, I think that he makes a serious mistake in interfering, politically at least. His tendency to make the executive power stronger than the houses of Congress is bound to be a bad thing, especially when a man of weaker personality succeeds him in office. Ever with love, FDR.
Franklin Roosevelt was a Harvard sophomore now, and echoing the conservative opinions of classmates whose well-to-do parents were appalled at his cousin's willingness to deal directly with labor. His own mother disagreed. One cannot help loving and admiring him the more for it, she told her son, when one realizes that he tried to right the wrong. When James Roosevelt, Franklin's father, had died in 1900, Sarah moved to Boston to be closer to her son. She interested herself in every aspect of his life, exulted in his successes, and overlooked his failures, just as she always had. Successes did not come easily. He was not an outstanding student or especially well-liked by his classmates. Many of them thought him an over-eager lightweight, just as his schoolmates at Groton had. He did become the editor of the Crimson and scored a minor scoop when he learned his famous cousin was coming to Cambridge. But when he ran for class marshal, he lost. Still too slight for sports, he led cheers at a football game, though he admitted it made him feel like a damned fool, waving my arms and legs before several thousand amused spectators. He was elected to several clubs and fully expected an invitation to join Harvard's most exclusive club, the Porcellian. He was a legacy after all. His own father had been an honorary member. His famous cousin Theodore belonged. But Franklin was blackballed, probably by someone who knew him at Groton, which made it even worse. As always, he let no one know how hurt he was. But 15 years later, he would confide to a young relative that his rejection by Porcellian had been the greatest disappointment of his life. He was disappointed in love as well. Alice Sawyer was the beautiful daughter of a wealthy Massachusetts yachtsman, the loveliest debutante of her year, Franklin remembered. And after courting her for several months, he asked her to marry him. One day he hoped to be president like his fifth cousin, he told her, and he hoped to have no fewer than 6 children, the same number that now called the executive mansion home. Alice turned him down. Later she would say that she'd rejected his proposal in part because I did not wish to become a cow. Franklin never told his mother about Alice, and to ensure she did not know too much about his private life, had used a secret code in his terse diary. But within weeks of his parting with Alice Sawyer in the late summer of 1902, a new name began to appear in its pages.
I have always been fond of the old West African proverb. Speak softly and carry a big stick, and you will go far.
The American expansionism Roosevelt had advocated since long before his days at the Navy Department had succeeded beyond his dreams. The United States was now a world power. It had annexed Hawaii, driven Spain from the New World, dominated Cuba and Puerto Rico, wrested the Philippines from the Spanish, and then begun a brutal, bloody campaign to subjugate the Philippine people, who wanted to be free of foreign rule by anyone, including Americans. Tens of thousands died so that the United States could gain a foothold in the Pacific. To anti-imperialists like Mark Twain, such military adventures betrayed American principles, and Roosevelt himself was nothing more than a showy charlatan.
I am an anti-imperialist. I am opposed to having the eagle put its talons on any other land.
Criticism did not much concern Theodore Roosevelt. He divided the world into what he called civilized nations, industrialized and mostly white, and uncivilized nations that produced raw materials, bought products instead of manufacturing them, and were incapable, he believed, of self-government. The great enemy of civilization was what he called chaos. To combat it, it was the duty of civilized and orderly powers to police the rest. Britain should be responsible for India and Egypt. Japan, which Roosevelt now numbered among the civilized nations because it had become an industrial and military power, should control Korea and the Yellow Sea. And the United States, and only the United States, must police the Western Hemisphere. It was called the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine.
I don't think Americans by nature are very comfortable with imperialism and never were. And had he tried to be more imperialistic than he was, he would have been stopped. I think he believed in power. He was not as good as he should have been in dealing with foreign nations, and particularly if he thought they were inferior to our way of life or to us as a people. His very high-handed treatment of the Colombians during the negotiations for the Panama Treaty was inexcusable.
For Roosevelt, one great expansionist vision remained unfulfilled. For more than half a century, American and European investors had dreamed of a Central American canal linking the Atlantic to the Pacific. Roosevelt believed such an interocean pathway was now indispensable for the full exercise of American naval power. A French company was already trying to build a canal across the jungle-covered Panama province in the nation of Colombia. But that effort had stalled, a victim of poor planning, lack of money, and deadly tropical diseases. When the French offered to sell their rights, Roosevelt agreed to buy them, then instructed his Secretary of State, John Hay, to negotiate a treaty with Colombia. It called for a payment of $10 million, plus an annual rental fee for a 6-mile canal zone across the isthmus. But the Colombian Senate rejected the deal and then demanded double the price. Roosevelt was enraged. I do not think that the Bogota lot of jackrabbits should be allowed permanently to bar one of the future highways of civilization, he said. The refusal of the Colombian Senate to honor its government's commitment was just the latest embodiment of the kind of chaos he deplored.
Roosevelt believed that a canal across the Central American Isthmus would be good for the United States and good for civilization. It would also be good for Theodore Roosevelt. He often mingled those three. And he believed that anybody, any government, any person who stood in the way of that was obstructing civilization. And Roosevelt had very little patience for those people who didn't see the way history was going, the way history is supposed to go, in the same light that he did. And he simply wouldn't allow them to get in the way.
He had resolved to get an American canal underway. He would not attack Colombia directly, but he would exploit the aspirations of the people of Panama Province, who had for 50 years asserted their wish to be independent of Bogota. Roosevelt agreed to meet with Philippe Bunau-Varilla, a lobbyist for the French canal builders, who was in touch with rebels already eager to rise against Colombian rule. It was a delicate conversation. What did the Frenchman think was going to happen in Panama Province? "Mr. President," his visitor said, "a revolution." Roosevelt was careful to say nothing about how the United States might